Acres Green Acres, and you are tuned in to the Anyone Can Farm live chat, the Thursday night edition. Today would be January 5th, 2023. Welcome to the new year. And with us tonight is Niti Bali. And Niti is someone that I met a few years ago at the Rogue Food Conference, of all things. I hope we can get into that a little bit tonight. That was an interesting conversation we had the other day. And Niti runs a food operation. I'm going to let her explain the ins and outs of it because I really don't know exactly what it is. I know it has something to do with Food Buying Club, but I'm going to let her explain that. And she agreed to come on and be interviewed by us tonight. So she's got her guinea pig status. And if you would, Niti, please tell us about yourself. Oh, before I forget, for those of you listening in, we've got a chat going here. So if you have questions for Niti, just like we do every week, ask the questions. And sky's the limit. Sky's the limit. So Niti, if you don't mind, welcome, and please tell us about yourself, if you would.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me this evening.
My pleasure.
And I'm really excited to talk with your folks here because you're one of my favorite people. I was very happy to have been able to meet you at the Rogue Food Conference. It was so much fun getting to know you and, like all the work that you're doing out there, which is incredible. And just learning from you. So, thank you for what you do.
You're welcome.
And I kind of fell into this whole food thing, like unintentionally. I was not like, you guys to me are like radically self-reliant, and it's amazing. And I'm coming from folks who were born slaves of the British India Company. Our family's from India. And
Okay.
so, I'm first generation born here. And the attitude, the, mindset of those folks, our parents, was, go to America so you can get have a better life. But it wasn't, like they weren't really thinking about owning it and being responsible 100%, like, self-reliant. It was not something, I don't think our parents even can conceive that even right now. And so, I'm coming at this from a completely different place. And I haven't come here lightly. I'll say that. We came here into this moment, through a lot of trials, and mainly what I've learned is that, I was basically raised to folks who were programmed by the orthodoxy. And, because the few people in charge, basically have gone to the largest populations of the planet and enslaved all these folks. And in cahoots with their own countries. And, the leaders of the world, the free world, whatever you want to call it, they've all conspired together to, like leverage this power differential and just basically enslave humanity, because it's, human resources is the greatest commodity on the planet.
Yeah.
So I was talking one time with Joel Salatin, and he said to me, I was telling him where I was coming from, because he couldn't understand, when I was trying to explain to him what I'm doing here, which I guess I should get to that. Like I started this food church, but the reason that I did that is because we had a child in 2007 that was diagnosed with Esthesioneuroblastoma. All I'm going to say is that our daughter was vaccine injured. We were 100%, trying to be the best parents that we could be, for our children. We read all the books and did all the training, as all the programmed, good people out there are, try to do. I mean, we're all of love, like, right? We're just wanting to do the best job that we can. And
Yeah.
so we were, dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's and reading all the books.
Yeah.
And we were interviewing the, pediatricians or whatever we thought was the responsible thing to do. Only to find out that, we had actually given all our power away to somebody else to make the, medical decisions for our children, which, now in retrospect is insanity, like I can't even believe that we did that, but, everybody's doing it right now, even, so anyway, we did that. We ended up in the hospital. We were at Duke Children's Hospital with our daughter, fighting for her life. And my husband and I, we received a rapid education about the centralized systems, how they operate, how, our healthcare system is actually just a disease management system, and that they have actually no interest in creating health because, it's not profitable. And so, we had a rapid education. At the end of the day, I ended up writing a book. I call it Farm to Fork Meat Riot. I created a meat riot, Mark, because I realized that meat was what was required for us to gain health, and we wouldn't be able to do that without meat. And anyone who didn't understand that, because, there's always this plant-based agenda for health and healing. And if you don't understand that meat is required and there's like this war against meat, then, if you end up in a situation like we did, which was catastrophic, then, you end up in crisis and then you realize what's going on. If you aren't ready to cause a riot as a side effect of that, if you're not angry, then get angry, get as offended as you can be, because you should be offended, and you should get angry. And I explain our story. The first third of this book is just our personal story. I don't want to get too far into it because I get very emotional.
Yeah, I understand.
And there's a lot of details. I just want you to know that basically we were able to cure our daughter's cancer with real regenerative meat. And that's what I talk about in the book. And so the second part of the book is talking about what I did with this information, which was basically I was just trying to source meat from, farms locally, only to find out that they all wanted to quit, and they were constantly threatening to quit. And I just didn't understand it. And, they didn't ever have enough meat. There was always this like fine line about it. I just couldn't understand what was going on, because doesn't all the food come from the farms, like to the grocery store?
Supposed to.
Yeah. So then I found out really, really fast that there's no food from real farms going to grocery stores. And then I just fell from one, pit of hell basically into another one, as all the centralized systems basically were being revealed to me. I felt like I was in this matrix that was kind of going, like it was all like falling apart all around me. And it was becoming completely unveiled for me that, our healthcare system is a disease management system. Our food system is an industrialized thing where they've tried to industrialize life, giving force and guise it as like food, and, sell it to people for a lot of money. And it's not even real. And so, I mean, I was really, really, I was feeling assaulted. I was assaulted by the truth.
Yeah.
So, you know, like the truth is belligerent.
So there was some trauma involved here, wasn't there?
Oh my gosh. The
I think
levels.
that it's important to share that trauma.
The levels of trauma were so many. First, they basically scare you to death. And, you know, like you go to the hospital with your child and they kind of shackle you there, you know, like if you don't do what we say right now, she's going to die. And then it becomes this like ongoing thing. We were literally living at the hospital for 6 months and it was insanity. You know, like first thing I want to say to everybody out there is if you are facing crisis and it's not like a bleeder, you know, then you really need to take a step back and, you know, like center and ground yourself before you make a next decision. And don't let somebody just talk you into whatever. Because unless you have like a rapid bleeder, like a bleeder, you can't, you know, obviously you got a tourniquet or do something. But if, you know, if you're not requiring a tourniquet in this red hot moment, then just stop. Like there's nothing happening in nature that isn't going to allow you grace to make a decision. And, you know, if you're involved in this medical mafia, then you can't even, you don't have time to think. They don't give you an opportunity to just breathe, you know, before the fear they slam on you. And when they put that fear on you, you can't possibly make a decision about anything, you know? So, yeah,
Well,
there
can
was.
you describe the illness that your daughter had?
So she had esthesioneuroblastoma. What it was it was a solid mass tumor that had formed behind the sinus, behind her, right? This whole area is the sinus cavity. So right about here is where the brain, you know, sits. That's the dura, and underneath it, you know, there's this sphenoid bone which opens up into our sinus cavity, which is right about here. You know, and inside of this sinus cavity, which is a bone structure, are all the, you know, all of these blood vessels. And it's, you know, all the vital structures are right, like caught up around all these major blood vessels that run right behind your face right here, you know.
Okay.
And that's all connected to like your carotid artery. And, you know, look, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not trying to give you guys like some anatomy class or anything like that. But I mean, I'm just giving you a very layman, you know, description. But her sphenoid bone, which in a child that's 2 years old, she was 2, it's called the rock bone. And it's solid like this when a child is born. And until it doesn't fully open up into the sinus cavity until they're like 10. And this heavy bone in the center of the head really makes the head really heavy, which is why children have a lot of hard time balancing and they're so clumsy. You know, as that bone opens up into the sinus cavity, then it becomes, you know, a little bit more manageable for them to be able to, that's when they start gaining balance after about 10 years old. So in her situation, this tumor had eaten up her entire sphenoid bone and taken the place of it. And it's basically was being fed by all those blood vessels. And so it was alive and thriving. And so, you know, 2-year-olds also have a very robust metabolic system, you know, like they're metabolizing things at such a rapid rate that, you know, because these kids are growing so fast that, you know, what people don't know is when a child that age has cancer, they are able to get 10 years worth of study done on that child within a year. And so these kids are not allowed to leave the hospital. Any other cancer patient is generally outpatient, like an adult cancer patient.
Yeah.
is normally outpatient, but these children are inpatient because they're basically lab rats. That's what they are.
Ooh.
100%. That's what they are.
But you believe that the meat that you procured for her was what cured her cancer?
100%.
And how did that turn out?
We were able to kill her cancer. It was so crazy. Mark, we come home from Duke because we decided that we were just going to, first of all, let me just say she was palliative at best upon presentation, friends. She was not going to survive. And they knew that. The doctors, they knew that. So if they're actually honoring their Hippocratic oath and not doing any harm, then they should have just said, we're so sorry. Like, we can't fix this.
Yeah.
That's what they should have said. That was the moral response. Their moral obligation was to say, we don't know how to fix this. I mean, when I was growing up, Mark, it was nothing for a doctor to just say, look, I'm not God. I can't fix this. And now they think they are God and they're just all trying to fix it.
Yeah.
Like, it's
There's
insane.
plenty of opportunity for them to keep managing the situation, and that seems like what happened. So how did it turn out? Let's cut to the chase here.
Well, we were able to bring her home and extend her life for 2 solid years, which they couldn't believe because she shouldn't have lived 24 hours. And we knew that she wasn't going to live because she was missing her sphenoid bone, for one thing.
Okay.
And so she structurally was completely damaged. But we were able to stop the deranged cells from multiplying.
Okay.
But she had also been through 5 rounds of chemo.
Yeah.
So we were expecting probably some recurrence because anyone who understands how chemotherapy works knows that, when you allow them to treat anyone with chemotherapy, that you are signing papers that say this causes cancer.
Yeah.
So, and I guess, some people try to liken that to, say homeopathy, where like treats like. But the difference is this is some man-made concoction. It is not nature.
Okay.
And it is not to be interpreted in that way. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's like Frankenstein, Franken medicine.
So it's then when her life finally ended, you made it your business to do what? And
Actually,
this is what led you where you are now?
so honestly, we started marketing. It's not a co-op what I'm doing. The food church that I created is not a co-op. It's I call it like a modified CSA because it's like a third-party CSA. And I think a lot of people get confused with that because CSAs generally require produce shares or something like that, And so I literally was just kind of making this up as I was going along. And the reason I was doing it is because I wanted to get a foothold of, like a relationship with a farm to get meat. And they needed sales. And I was a salesperson. And it's my background, actually. I talk about it in the book. Like, if you guys get my book, then I'm not trying to just say read the book and, I'm not going to tell you anything, but it's in context and it kind of matters. It's a lot of information. I couldn't possibly tell you everything, like in this conversation, but you should know that Meenakshi, my daughter, started this with me. And she used to go, like, we put it together as a family before she had secondary cancers and before we lost her, which was really fast. So like we started this in April, like April of 2009, and she died September 13th, 2009. So it's pretty fast. But the relationships that we established with the farms began in 2008. And like when we left Duke in the spring, and we had been getting enough food and enough stuff and whatever our relationships were, we had by the next spring realized if we don't try to create a market for these people, we're not going to have any food. You know, because at that time, even I was saying to my husband, I go, I guess we got to raise our own animals or something. And he's like, I don't know how to raise any livestock. And, you know, he's just like, why don't we just support the people that are doing it? Like, it doesn't make any sense for us to do something we don't know what we're doing. And I'm like, yeah, you know, they like one human being can't do everything. And so I just felt like if I can help in this way, then that's fine. And all of us need the food anyway. And then I just started telling people in my community, hey, did you know? Like I told all our friends, I was like, there is no food from real farms going to the grocery store. Did you know that? Like, I just figured this out, you know? And they were all just like, what? And I mean, this was just our day-to-day conversation. Like all the people that we were hanging around, you know, I was like, hey, did you know? And they were just like, that can't be true. Like, where would it come from? And so then I started telling them about the CAFOs, you know, the confined animal feeding operations. And then they were just like, what? So then me and some of my friends, we would go try to find these CAFOs. Because, you know, we're in North Carolina. We have the largest CAFOs in the world right here.
Yeah, you do.
So we drove out to Smithfield and were received by snipers. Because they have snipers around those.
Really?
places. Oh, they're armed. It's crazy. You can't go back there. It's an iron curtain.
Huh. I did not know that.
There's an iron curtain. Now, there are some like Purdue farms, you know, where it's just like a random farmhouse that has a whole bunch of those, you know, those chicken houses.
Yeah.
But the pork operations are huge.
Yeah.
Smithfield is big.
Yeah.
And it's very scary. They're scary. They're scary looking. You don't look like I'm not comfortable just like walking up into something like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of nuts. It's kind of nuts. You can smell them from miles away. Did
Oh,
you know
yeah.
the drift from Smithfield CAFOs causes asthma in children in Raleigh?
It doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Actually,
So
nothing surprises me anymore, but
Oh.
yeah, I've been around those things, and it's hard to believe that the same governmental departments that will restrict all kinds of things don't restrict that. It's hard to believe that, actually.
It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts what they allow and then what they try to restrict. And like me, they came to my house, Mark. Just my little old house, not on any land, in town, and demanded that I open my garage. I was like, no.
All right, let's before we get into that, let's back up a little bit. Okay, so
Sure.
you've got a hybrid CSA, and you go by the handle the pharmacist. We can see it on there. So what is this CSA? What's so different about it? So you've gone through some trauma with the death of a child. That's huge. That's huge. And coming out the other side of it, you've said, I need to fix something here. So tell us about what you've done with your CSA, your hybrid CSA.
So
explain it.
What
I know about it, but I think I want these people to know about it too.
Sure. Yeah. No, well, what I learned was that, you know, I realized that, oh, we have to be responsible for feeding ourselves. And, you know, this is like a completely new concept, right? To me and a whole lot of other people around town. No one knows this, right? And I realized that the farmers are telling me, well, nobody wants this food, so we're just going to quit. And then I'm finding out that North Carolina is losing, 10% of their farmers every year. And now we like basically don't have any farms. And all of Eastern North Carolina, I realized, was being bought out by China. And I'm like, how do North Carolinians don't know this? And who let this happen? And why is China buying up a bunch of North Carolina, like all of Eastern North Carolina? It was really crazy and confusing for me, and so I was like, well, I just need us to have real food. And these farmers just need someone who wants it. And it wasn't very organized, Mark. I mean, I really was just like shocked. I have to tell you, I was in a serious depression. We just lost our child, you know?
Yeah.
And I was just, all I knew is that I was angry. I didn't want any more babies to die. I had just been sitting in Duke Children's Hospital watching kids drop dead because they were all like vaccine injured or they had some type of medical murder situation going on. And so I just started talking about it. I just started talking about it everywhere in the community. And then I don't know, people just started calling me randomly. Like people would find me, and I don't even know how they found me, Mark. And then I decided, well, I must need a website, you know? And I didn't know anything about making a website or whatever, because I'm not like some tech person or anything. And back then, I mean, like nowadays you have all these, Shopify and like 10 million different carts and, whatever. But like in 2007, like remember, YouTube only started in 2008. I didn't even have a smartphone back then. Okay.
Yeah,
I
I
had
didn't either.
yeah, I didn't have anything like that. So, I mean, I had a BlackBerry, which was not a phone. It was like a computer address book thing. It
Yeah,
wasn't,
I remember it. It's like a
yeah,
messenger.
it was like a little, I don't know, like an address book thing. And I only had it because of my job, like I inherited it from a place that I used to work because once we had kids, I was home. But no stay-at-home mom had a cell phone really that I can remember at that time.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't a thing. You got a phone from work. You didn't just get a phone. Like people didn't just have phones
Right.
at that time. And they definitely didn't have like a smartphone.
No, we didn't have them. They just weren't out yet. They weren't yet at that time.
No. And so people need to realize that when this happened to us, there was no Facebook group for it or Facebook or whatever.
Yeah.
It happened in 2007. Facebook started in 2008. And when it did start, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but it was basically we were sharing pictures with our family. That was about it.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything like what it is today.
No.
So like back then it was just like you shared some pictures. It was like grandma's photo album, basically,
Yeah.
So anyway, that wasn't some place that somebody would go to build a business or something like that. But I had a marketing background in real estate, and I was I was a success trainer actually in real estate in my past life. I call it my past life. It was before I got married. When I was a young professional, because I didn't meet my husband until I was 29, so I was pretty old when we met. And so I had this whole corporate career before that, and that was my background. So when I met these farms, and I was like, they just need some marketing, And then I realized that in a grocery store, when they said chicken was all natural, this is marketing 101, like state the obvious. It's chicken. What else could it be? It's all natural. But now I'm realizing, oh, this is something else. This means, like for the random person who shops in a grocery store, it seems like, of course, it's all natural chicken. Like what in the world otherwise would it be? It is all natural. It's a chicken, But but knowing what I knew, I realized, oh no, there's CAFO chicken. And then there's this next level of like organic, because this is just the beginning of organic was coming out right around that time.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, is this a scam? Is organic real? You know, like what's going on with this organic thing? And then I started looking into the companies, because then I'm like, is it really better? And everything that I would find is like, okay, no, this is still nonsense. Okay, no, this is still dirty. Okay, no, you know, every time I would like look into one of the different labels, or, you know, because I don't remember all the names, but it started back in that time with all natural. And then, you know, subsequently over the years, it's been organic, and, you know, then it was cage free, or I don't know what. Like, I don't know the order of this, friends, but like, you know,
Yeah.
it went through this little
Oh, yeah.
process. And every year they would come up with something else, like sustainable or whatever. And, you know, one more thing. And at that time, though, I remember that we would just say, you know, this is as nature intended, when I would talk about what now is like regenerative meat. Okay. We would just say, well, this is as nature intended. These are from people who we know. People who we know. Because then I was just telling moms, because then I start getting called, you know, the same time that our daughter died, our next door neighbors, their children were diagnosed with celiac. Our backyard neighbors were, you know, the husband was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Our other neighbor on the other side of us, they had, you know, children in their family, like cousins and stuff, that were all diagnosed with leukemias, like various leukemias. So
Yeah.
all of us were in some sort of crisis. It was so weird. Like, why would everybody around me have a crisis happening at the same time, like health crisis within their family? And then we realized our entire little friend group, like everybody, some major thing was going on with everybody. One mother had breast cancer, another kid has autism all of a sudden, you know, who wasn't having autism, like was just a normal kid the day before. And then, you know, like, so there's this cascade of crisis happening within our community. And then I found out from our daughter's preschool class of 12 children, 4 of them have cancer. Our daughter was the one who we lost, but 3 others had cancer now too. And today, I can tell you that out of those 12 children, 6 of them are dead. What? And then so someone said to me, "Oh, was it something from that school?" No, they were only in school for a minute together. I'm just telling you that I happen to know the families, and this is what happened over the years, because, you know, we're a pretty tight community, and we, you know, it was part of my YMCA family, because the kids went to school at the Y.
Okay.
And so we knew all those families from the Y. And so, and these are obviously health conscious people who were going to the Y and, you know, working
Yeah.
out, and I mean, trying to do the things that you're supposed to do, you know, to raise healthy families. So I just basically had people calling me saying, "Well, what did you do? How did you do this?" And, you know, next thing you know, I'm like, "Well, you should want this real food. And this is what we did to make it better." And the next thing you know,
Yeah.
I'm like, I started out as like us just wanting food for us. Then, you know,
Yeah.
well, our friends needed it. Then, you know, more of our friends needed it. And more of our friends were interested or said they were interested. Then random people would start calling me, like my friend's friend, somebody found out about our story through our friend. And then they would call me and say, "I heard about you. I heard about this thing, you know." And next thing you know, I'm like, "Hey, okay, so I have this modified CSA, and you know, this is how we can all buy food together, you know?" And so I wasn't promoting it, I wasn't marketing it, I wasn't trying to sell it or anything. And then I don't know, like within a year, within 2 years, by the end of 2 years, we had over 100 families. And I'm trying to run this thing out of my garage.
So
And
that means you're going out and procuring the food, or are people bringing it, are farms bringing it to you and you're just hanging
Well,
on
it
to it until you
started
turn it
out,
over?
yeah, it started out that first I was just aggregating stuff, and I wasn't even doing a good job aggregating it because, I was having more conversations with moms on the phone most of the time than I was actually, like, going out to farms to aggregate. And then it got
Yeah.
to the point where I was like, there's really no farms. There's like 3 farms, and they're barely, you know, growing enough food for all of us. And this is kind of nuts.
Yeah.
And the more I got into it, the more I realized that, I mean, this is guys like, this is before we even knew about GMOs. Like, people weren't talking about GMOs because Jeffrey Smith's book on GMOs didn't even come out until 2009. So, and I mean, I was probably one of the first people that read it, like, because, I was just following all these rabbit trails, you know, and I'm following stuff with the farms, and the farms are like, well, we don't know that this feed is actually going to affect us coming through the animals. And then I started saying, well, we have people who are sensitive to your chicken because of the GMO soy or, whatever, corn. And it turned into this thing, and it just got bigger than me. It just got really bigger than me a lot faster. And next thing you know, I was in brick and mortar, and I'm like getting in trouble because I found out I'm not allowed to help people procure, this meat, and that it's illegal for me to aggregate it, supposedly, and
So
help.
you're still in your garage at this point?
Well, I was in my garage until my mom came over one day, and I had coolers all wrapped around my whole house. And she's just like, you're going to get kicked out of this neighborhood. And, like, if this is something that you want to do, then you should get like some commercial space. But you know what? I think a lot of people don't understand, like, to get commercial space, you got to fill a lot of checks and boxes to be able to
Yeah,
even
you do.
get commercial space. And so she helped me because my mom was in real estate, and she was like, let's just call it a learning center. You're teaching all these mothers how to cook. Because really, most of the people who had sick children, it was because their parents didn't even know how to cook food, never mind grow food. I mean, you talk about radical self-reliance. These people don't know how to chop an onion. Like, they definitely can't try to figure out how to manage livestock. I mean, you have to be kind of a doctor of everything over there, Mark. I mean, you guys, you're the electrician and the plumber and the and the
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And, I mean, coming out of the military, it seems like you would have had training well, you know how to get off the X, right? You know how to save yourself. Meanwhile, the general public is trained to wait for somebody to come help them
Yeah,
or
they
call
are.
911.
That's true. They are trained to wait. Yeah.
Like, I'm telling you, as a ex-slave, I
Yeah.
was just like, oh, somebody's supposed to come and save me. I'm not supposed to do anything. I can't do anything, because they convince you. We're trained to not do anything. We're trained to just sit and wait.
Last night we have our consulting call on Wednesday nights, and I brought this up, and Dave and Sonia are with us, so they heard this. But you, in a conversation we had one time, it came up about slavery, and what did you call it? POCs, people of color. You use that, right? And that rang through because I never really thought of people from India as people of color, right? But they experienced more slavery in their country than we did here. We had people who were slaves, but your whole population was enslaved because the caste system and everything else. The other day, I was listening to a podcast, and it was with Kanye West, formerly known as Kanye West. Now he's just Ye.
Yeah.
I actually like the guy. I actually like
Yeah.
him, but he made a statement.
Uh-huh.
He said slavery is a choice.
Yep.
And what you're describing right now is is a perfect example of deciding whether or not you're going to be at the beck and call of the master, or you're going to decide to break out of it. So please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's just a perfect rendition of that.
In fact, I've been teaching people here in the food church. I have an entire chart that I've made to encourage people to shed the slave self. And I started an entire program for remnants rising, because we are the remnants that are rising. If you're breaking out of this matrix, which, by the way, does exist, there is a programming, a training, I mean, India was taken over by the Brits, and they were under British rule for 400 years. Friends, what that means is that any of the current generations have no idea what our actual real culture ever was, because anybody could tell us anything and we just have to believe it. And if you talk to our parents, my husband was offended when I woke up one day and I was like, oh my God, we're the children of, our parents were born slaves to the British India Company. And he's like, maybe your parents were, but not mine. And I was like, our parents were born, and they will tell you that we were born in India, and we, British rule ended in 1947. My mother was born in the middle of the blackouts in 47. Okay. And so what people don't understand, that they don't understand that when you are a slave, you don't know you're a slave.
Right.
And I would argue that the slaves that were here, they didn't know that they were slaves, because otherwise Harriet Tubman would have saved more than 1,000 of them. And she only could get 1,000 of them to come up here to the north with her, because they weren't going to leave their whole family and their whole whatever life. Like, they had a life.
Yeah, they did.
And it was a comfortable life, whatever the life was. It was, yes, listen, I'm not saying slavery is correct. We were enslaved for forever. And now the whole world is enslaved and chooses voluntary slavery. What do you call yourself when some crazy person goes on television giving you medical advice and you follow it? You're crazy. Why would you take medical advice from the television box and just do whatever it says, because you're going to otherwise die? People were like, well, Niti, my mother-in-law said to me, well, people are dying. I go, well, people were dying yesterday and the day before that, and you didn't care. You don't know how many people die every day. You don't have any idea what the stats are. Why don't we look that up? Why don't we look up what the average deaths are in a day anywhere, and then see if there's a rise or not? People. But she was just like, but people are dying. I go, I don't see people dropping dead outside. I don't see people walking around outside just dropping dead. And if this is the pandemic, the way that they describe it to be, if it's airborne or whatever's happening, people should just be dropping dead.
Right.
Like, outside.
I gotta caution you. We have to be very careful about that conversation. Because I'll get a strike. So, we can talk about Sasquatch if you want, no problem.
Sure.
We can talk about child porn, no problem.
Right.
But if you talk about that and the narrative, and maybe we don't feel as though the narrative is quite accurate, that's a huge problem. So we got to stay away from that. And along the slavery lines, like, hopefully
we can talk about slavery. I think we can talk about slavery because they aren't onto that yet.
Oh yeah, we can talk about that all day long. I've said on this channel that, I went to Mount Vernon actually, and I learned a lot there, but they throw in your face that George Washington, father of the country and a great general, but he had slaves. But I felt the same way as you, what you just said. Like, I don't think they knew they were slaves necessarily, because it's not like they had the option of living someplace else. They could be traded off to a different plantation or farm. But on Mount Vernon, they had a lot of freedom, and like George Washington had a problem with them. One of the things he complained about was that they were night walking, which meant, a man would go over to a different plantation to visit with his girlfriend over there. And so he's walking around at night and not as spry as he should be the next day. But eventually we come around to food. All right. So
Yeah.
you're procuring food.
Yeah. I mean, what I guess my main point with all of that, you guys, is that, in the States, what people think, people get real upset with me about this. They're just like, you don't understand what it's like to be a slave. And I'm like, really? Because I think I do. Also, they took Indians out of their country and carried them all over the world and spread them everywhere. So there's Indians in South Africa and Indians in London, and there's there's like Indians all over the world. And so
there's Irish people, same way. They did it with Irish people too.
Yeah, I mean,
slave isn't a breed. Slave is a state of existence.
Right. And you get to choose. So here's the thing, is that the only way that you can be a slave is to voluntarily give away all your power. And that was what I realized. I mean, the minute that I woke up to this whole thing, like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Then I was liberated, and I was just free to just move about the cabin and do whatever I wanted to do. And I was like, wait a minute. All I'm trying to do is help moms get meat for their babies. Like, this is all I'm trying to do.
Okay.
And then you're going to try to tell me that this is illegal. Everywhere,
okay.
like, we get back to the food thing. Yeah, so we get back to the food thing.
Yeah, so you got pushback. You've created the food church. You're ministering to young mothers who have sick children, and then you got pushback from who?
Everybody. Oh my gosh. First, the biggest pushback I got was, you're not allowed to give people medical advice.
Now, who told you that?
Everybody. They're all like, well, I guess it started, I think the first time I heard it was Department of Ag. Like, they're like, you can't tell anybody this meat's going to make them better. You can't tell them that. And I'm like, what? And they're like, you can't tell them that they're going to get healthier by eating this meat.
So
and I go,
the First Amendment doesn't apply there?
Well,
the right to free speech? So
here's the thing. I never thought about it, because, I was a slave, Mark. Okay. I didn't understand. Like, they don't teach us the power of the Bill of Rights or anything. Yeah. They don't. They tell you that this is how laws are made. I don't even know if they tell the kids that anymore. I don't know what they tell the kids anymore. But like when I was in school, then, I think I'm going to tell you what the extent of knowledge that I had about the Bill of Rights or our Constitution was whatever I learned on Schoolhouse Rock. That's pathetic, but that is it. That was it. I don't remember any time in school learning, like, that these are the laws of the country.
Yeah. There's a good reason for that.
Sure. But I'm saying, I heard you teach it, and I was just like, oh my gosh, he's right. And I was just like, it was just ridiculous that I was never thought of that ever. Like, never thought of it one single time. And it's fascinating because you and I spoke at the Rogue Food Conference, one behind the other. I spoke, and then you got up. And when you were speaking, I was just like, man, I was doing these things just because I felt like I'm not doing any harm to anyone. I'm not doing any harm to anyone. I'm trying to do what's the right thing to do for these moms, I'm trying to help save the babies. Like, that's all I was thinking about. And if this mother wants to hear what I have to say, then she and I should be able to have an adult conversation. I don't even know why anybody else is involved. But the reason I ended up making it a food church, just so y'all know, is because I was having these conversations with these mothers, and I was being warned even by my mom and like just my husband, that he's just like, we don't need litigious threats because you're giving all this medical advice out to people. And so then I said, well, I'll just create my own food church then, because churches can say whatever they want. And if someone shows up to listen to what a church has to say, then they're allowed to hear it, and so I can create a congregation. And if these people show up, then they chose to come and hear what I had to say. And so then I started telling everybody, I was like, if you want to hear what I have to say, you need to join my food church. So that, and when you join a food church, if you pay tithes to the food church, you're an official member, right?
Yeah.
And that's evidence that you chose to be there. And so to me, that was a better contract than a contract. So I made them pay tithes, and I created a nonprofit because I didn't know what else to do. Because I didn't know about the Bill of Rights, and I didn't know about the Constitution. Honestly, I didn't really know how to leverage that or think about it. I never thought of it until I met you, which is stupid. It's crazy. It's crazy.
That was a kind of an interesting exchange, wasn't it? I think a lot of people in that room had never heard of the Bill of Rights at that point. That was pretty sad. Okay, so you created the food church, and did that put an end to the pushback from the powers that be? First of all, who was pushing back? Give me a list of who was pushing back on you.
So it started with the NCDA.
The NCDA?
North Carolina Department of Ag.
Okay, NCDA.
Mm-hmm. So it started with them because, I was handling meat. And I wasn't trying to do anything wrong. They said if I'm going to handle meat, I should have a meat handler's license. So
should or must? I'm gonna do that because you and I both know. I mean, we've been experimenting a little bit with how entities change words.
Yes.
And they use words. They may be really highly qualified in wordsmithing, and then they'll use words interchangeably. Like, so the word should is, well, you should do this. But the word must indicates that you can make me do it if I choose not to. So was it should or must? Or at that time, did you key on that?
Okay, so at that time, I was 100% ignorant of all of that language. Yeah. The linguistics theft is what you're talking about, and the manipulation of language, but I wasn't even privy to it at that time. And now, of course, I'm far more knowledgeable about the linguistics theft and legalese versus, anything else. So yes, over time, over all of these years, like what I started that 14 years ago. I mean, I would say the first 5 years was a rapid education in language and legalese. Because they started coming for me, and it was kind of nuts because the same guy who was my meat handler, whatever guy, inspector, this regulator who used to come to my house, he was really kind and everything at my house. And all of a sudden, when we moved to commercial space and he knew I was growing, then he was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now he's crazy. And he really wants to, he was really trying to find a way to shut me down all the time. All the time. He went to my landlord more than once to say, I'm shutting this operation down.
That's problematic, isn't it?
It was crazy. The only thing I will say that because of my real estate background, I had already warned when we were signing our lease, we explained that we're teaching people something, that it's an education center. and that, regulators misunderstand what we're doing on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And that, they might come by, please don't be bothered by that and whatever. And it would never hold. They could never shut me down, like actually. But they would go to my landlord and say, we're shutting her down. Can you imagine what it's
Oh
like
yeah.
to have?
They don't surprise me. Let me ask you something. Did you have any licenses at the time?
I had a meat handler's license.
Okay. So that's where they got you into a contract.
Yep.
So you either, we can reverse engineer this. They said you either should have a meat handler's license or you must have a meat handler's license.
Right.
And if it should, then you should say, run along, Junior, and don't ever come back here again. If it's must, then you have to uh, I will allow you to explain yourself why I must do anything for you,
Right.
and
Well, at the time, I remember that, I was working out of my home. I mean, I'm it's just me and some other moms. Okay. It's like
yeah,
this is not, I don't know what people are imagining this looks like, but it's like, seriously, it's me and some moms trying to get some meat. Okay.
yeah,
And it's like one or two moms walking up and down my driveway every hour or so for them to come pick up their share. Okay. It's like,
yeah,
this isn't like, the traffic you see in front of a grocery store at my house. Okay.
mhm,
And so, it was something that, I mean, honestly, I did it in the daytime because we have an HOA in the neighborhood. And I did it while everybody was at work. So it wasn't bothering anybody. And I only was helping people get their food 2 or 3 days a week, which was honestly limiting,
mhm,
because they could only get their stuff 1 or 2 days out of the week.
yeah,
And otherwise, so when I moved into brick and mortar, it was important to me to make it accessible as many days as possible, for people to get their food.
yeah, yeah,
And so I was trying to do that. And then, now these regulators, well, so I ended up getting my license at the house because I was doing anything to avoid any litigious
yeah.
conflict.
I know you. So you think you'll cooperate, and that'll make it easier.
Yeah, you think that, this is not a big deal. Besides that, I thought they used to, what they said to me is these people are going to look to see if you have a license. They're going to come to our site to see if you're licensed or not. And if you're not, then, they're not going to want to do business with you.
Yeah,
And which was funny because none of these people know that they're supposed to be looking for a meat handler's license.
or do they care? I
Right.
just had people eat over my house. We had a couple of people over for dinner. We don't have meat handler's license. So,
I
I
didn't
mean,
know
these
about
are
it.
the reason I make that point, and what I want the listening audience to key on here is when you hear stories about this, like this, and you put yourself in Nithi's place, you think, well, that's no fun. That's scary. I don't want to be there. So we're trying to talk about ways to avoid that. So you don't wind up in that position where you have an agreement with these Department of Agriculture outfits or anybody else. HOA can be a problem too. An HOA's, if you want to live there, you make an agreement that you will do certain things and you will not do other things. So you're making a contract. And the Department of Ag is very similar. They have no real authority, only the contract that you get in with them. That's where they gain authority. So in theory, you could call them up and say, okay, I want your license. And they say it's this much. And you could say, well, I'm not paying that much. I'll do it for half of that. And they like, well, we can't negotiate that. And you could say, well, then I want you to come and work at my farm for 2 days a week. How about that? Will that help? Well, no, I really can't. So, I mean, they are the ones that lay out the contract criteria, and it's either take it or leave it. And I say you should leave it every single time because, like, to think that having a license is going to enhance your business profile with moms, that's ridiculous. That's not gonna. Moms don't care. They just want food for their kids. Okay, so did they back off once you became a church?
No.
No.
So no, because now they're like, what's a food church? you know? And I was like, well, I said, we believe in real food. And I really didn't say anything else. They're just looking at me like, what? And I go, why does it matter to you? I said, this has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you have a website and it looks like you're selling meat. And I go, okay, well, maybe you're misunderstanding. I don't know. And they were like, but it looks like that's what you do. And I go, okay, well, perception is everything, I guess. I get the thing that's funny about websites is you can make a website look like anything you want it to. It doesn't mean it's real. It doesn't mean it even does anything. Like, look at how you said one time, Mark, I loved it. You were like, in the military, when you would be in other countries, maybe it was you, maybe it was somebody else. I might be misspeaking here, but it was either you or someone else I know who was in the military said that when you would go to other places in the world, then you would see people having to deal with real life problems, like real, like they're trying to get water and you'd come back to the States and it's like, it's like, it's based, like you'd come home and you'd be like, Americans are into like nothingness.
Yeah.
That was you, I think, right? Yeah. So I just,
that's very true.
I mean, the things that people are concerned about is, and they're triggered by everything, which I want everyone out there to know. If you're triggered, or if you know people that are triggered because by somebody that says something, that means you're brainwashed. Like, this is a psychological term, trigger, and like they've put it out there. The people who programmed you, they put it out there and they tried to redefine and reuse this word. It's called linguistics theft. They started making it more common to use triggered as, and like when we were growing up, Mark, we would say, hey, you made me mad. And then if some friend of yours came up to you and said, Mark, you really made me mad, when you said such and such, then you might say to them, oh, I'm sorry. That isn't what I intended. Like, I'm sorry I made you mad. I didn't mean to make you mad. I was just saying something, whatever. And then they would say, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. Okay. And then you just go on about your day. It was over, right? Well, now people are like, you said, rah, 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 and they can't express to you, hey, when you said that made me mad. Don't say that to me, and then give you an opportunity to make it right somehow, or explain yourself to them a little bit, or clarify, because, there's misunderstandings between people all the time. Nowadays, you can't have a misunderstanding. That person's going to go off to somebody else and be like, hey, Mark triggered me. I don't like him anymore. And they don't want to have anything to do with you anymore, or whatever. So what I want people to realize is, if you feel like you're getting triggered, or you're being triggered on any regular basis, that means that you have been programmed. And that is what television does. It's called television programming for a reason.
Yeah.
It's like I agree normal. They're trying to normalize crazy things. Like,
I know. It's crazy.
So they've normalized this thing that if you're doing business without permissions, which means any license, like you don't want to go see, they even do it about the news, now, since there's social media and stuff, and YouTube channels and stuff, they say, don't listen to alternative news. We are your newscasters, or this is the real news, or whatever they say. but they, my mother-in-law even said to me one time, she said, hey, Niti, we believe in what's happening right now. Like, we believe we can't see you right now. Like, it's not safe to go outside. We believe in this. And you don't really, you watch those alternative newses. You watch all the alternative news. And I go, you mean the boots on the ground? You mean like when I go outside and I see like what's happening for real in the world? Like the reality, when I immerse myself in life and I come back and report like what's happening, like people aren't dropping dead. You can come outside, it's safe. Like, isn't that what people did a long time ago? Like, if you thought something was going on and someone was going to be brave enough to go outside and see if they weren't going to drop dead, and then they came back and they made it and they were like, hey, nobody really dropped dead. I don't know what's going on. Like, it's safe, it's fine, it's clear, all clear, right? We're not allowed to do that anymore because that's called the alternative news.
Yeah. But again, they throw it out there, right? The TV throws it out there, the programming that they want you, and you can either take it or leave it. And I think that it's time that more people just say, I don't have time for that. Like, we don't even turn it on anymore. It's been so long since we've never had the TV at this house. We've been here 18 years. So it's very uninteresting. So we don't turn it on. And so we don't get all that programming. And, I really am at a point where I believe that it's a lot of people who want to be programmed. It's like, I'm going to leave them alone. Just be programmed then. But I'm not going to. And so long as there's enough of them that are being programmed, I can kind of run around and do what I want. And nobody really cares. Like, there aren't drones flying around to make sure I don't say certain words or, do certain things. They program into you that they're watching you, but they're really not. They're really not. You can kind of do what you want most of the time, it seems to me. I never get any pushback on anything, but I just mind my own business. And I don't know. We've been told, even from the right, we've been told a lot of things that I don't believe are true. The Rothschilds and, George Soros and all. That's not really what enslaves us. We choose slavery by, I thought I'd put a garden in. I better go ask the county if it's okay. What? You're on private property, you imbecile. You can do what you want so long as it's not illegal. That means there's not a law against it. But if you go ask the county, somebody up there with the name of Karen will tell you, so long as you don't have any curry powder out of it or something,
Yeah.
So I think that we still.
If you try to immerse yourself in town, like, look, your pushback came after you tried to go to a market, wasn't it?
No, my pushback came after I questioned them. Oh. Them being the department said that I had to dispossess my private property. And I, like an adult, I'm just out of the military and I thought we're on the same side. I said, hey, what's the story with this? And these bureaucrats, I still can't believe that I didn't laugh in their faces. I just thought maybe they're so smart that they appear to be petty and childish. But I just, I tried to reason with them. No, don't you understand? I'm an American citizen here. I have the right to my private property. No, you don't. The environment takes precedence. And you're just dealing with a bunch of idiots. And they don't really get anywhere with you unless you try to negotiate with them. If you just say, run along, and they say, well, you could get a $10,000 fine, then do it. Let's see you do it. They don't have what they say they're going to have. Like your guy, if you'd have just told them to pound sand, go away, private property, get the hell off. Walk out with a 12 gauge maybe and say, oh, I was just looking for, no, maybe that's not a good idea.
That's
But you
not a
have
good
the right to
idea.
own and bear arms. See, maybe if there was just a 12 gauge
Well,
in the corner, he might get the idea that, hey, that thing could go off.
that would be different if I was on my land.
Oh, that's right. You were in, yeah, on commercial
I was in
property.
a leased property, so like it's very difficult to defend it in the same way. I mean,
Yeah,
I defended it, but I can't defend it in the same way that I would if I had your land. Like if I was at home on my land,
yeah,
then that I would defend that in a completely different way. But and that was why, I like a lot of people used to say to me, Mark, like, well, you could come do the food church over here, or you can share space with us over here. And, like try to help subsidize that because really the big thing about trying to help folks aggregate regenerative meat and get it to them is that there isn't any room in the margin for infrastructure.
that's true.
you know
That's
and
true.
so because there's no room in the margin for infrastructure, like a lot of folks, the other thing people would thought was like, oh well, you have a nonprofit, so you're just giving away food. No, that's not what we're doing.
Hmm.
And then people are always like, well, how do we qualify for your nonprofit? Oh my gosh. I was like, wow. And so I was trying to explain to everybody, hey guys, the USDA is on record stating, and the FDA is on record stating, Americans do not have the right to choose what they eat.
Well, they can
And
say that, but they say all kinds of stupid things
well, what
that
I mean is, and they're actually
contradict.
right, because if you're going to the grocery store, then you only get what they aggregate for you.
That's true. That's
So
true.
you don't actually get to choose what you eat.
That's
If you're
true.
going to any of their centralized distribution locations, which includes every single restaurant that meets health code,
Yeah,
you don't get to choose because the person running that restaurant doesn't even get to make you what they want to make for you because they have to meet health code, which means they can't buy Mark Baker's pork.
that's true.
They can't buy Mark Baker's eggs, and
Yeah,
it becomes a very crazy, like people are like, oh, that restaurant is farm to table. No, they meet health code. If they meet a health code, they have
yeah,
to wash all that stuff in bleach water, disinfect it, and make sure it's dead before and by dead, I mean, it should not be enzymatically alive.
yeah. That's
And so
true.
you don't want to eat that. But people eat at restaurants left, right, and center all day long like it's no big thing. And I'm like, this is not real food. This is imitation food. And even if it means that it started out as something halfway clean, they've enzymatically murdered it. So it's not the same. Not the same. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think I'm looking at the chat, Mark, and I think that everybody, like, we've been all over the board because me and Mark just like to talk to each other. We have a good time, but I probably haven't been as focused as I ought to be about explaining exactly what we do. But what I do at the Food Church, friends, is we have a membership here. They are all part of the Food Church. You have to be a member because we're member. Well, your membership fees actually pay for our brick and mortar and everything for the reasons I just spoke of, which is there's no margin in the cost of the meat to be able to support infrastructure. So that's how we pay bills here. And I try every single time that I try to shut it down and quit. I have a huge drive of members who are like, you can't leave. Like, we need you to give us food. We need you to help us get the food. Even during all of the 2020, attack,
yeah,
they, people, I tried to quit, and they were just like, no, like, and so I said, well, I'm not moving back out into brick and mortar because that's what I had to do at that time, Mark. I had to move back out because I had stopped brick and mortar. I had gone back home I had only taken a few people with me who were very serious about really wanting well aggregated food. And I was focused on my coaching, like my health coaching, my nutrition coaching. And I had just decided I was going to do that until we could move out and have some land or something. I was like, when America's ready for this, we'll move out and we'll just do something. Well, it didn't seem like Americans were ready. And then I wrote my book, and then we did Rogue Food, literally on the heels of my book being finished. And I thought that year, 2020, was supposed to be my year of touring and like teaching and promoting my book. Like that was what was going to happen. And we were all locked down. I wasn't really locked down. I still did things, but like no one was going to let me come and talk about my book.
Yeah.
So that was what was going on.
Hey, so talk about Rogue Food. Talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Well, I guess we need to give people some information first. What do you want to say?
Oh, I'm just the word Rogue Food.
Well, let's just tell them what it was and what you thought it should be. I was fascinated with what you said. So y'all, Mark and I were talking, and he and I, were invited to come speak as Rogue Food leaders at this Rogue Food conference. And when I was invited to come do that, I was kind of like, oh, I didn't know I was rogue. I just thought I was doing the right thing, but okay. I guess this is what it's called,
Yeah.
Well, Mark didn't. What did you think, Mark? What did you think about it?
I had already been through the fire at this point, and when you hit the press to test button, when you hit the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights to see if it really works, and it does, then you know that it works, right? So the Fifth Amendment, my listening audience has heard this a million times. It says that your life, liberty, and property is protected under the due process of law, which means if you're in the farming business and you're not farming something that is illegal, you don't have to be certified or licensed or anything. You don't have to be regulated by anybody. You don't have to allow any of those people in your space. And so I thought this was a way to point out their rogueness. Like they are rogue from the law of the land, which is the U.S. Constitution. But you see, what the Department of Ag does is they say, yeah, you can farm so long as you have permission from us. That's rogue, in my opinion. But when we took the stage, we were rogue. Right. And I don't agree with that. And like when you say something like, well, we should be able to, well, that indicates that we're not able to. But if you review the Constitution, if you review, especially the Bill of Rights, Fifth Amendment is a real good one. Mm-hmm. You see that anything that is not illegal, you can do. And if some schmuck comes along and wants you to get a license or a permit, you just need to resist that and say, no, thanks. I don't need it. And they'll say, oh, yes, you do. Say, well, I'm not going to get it. So you take your best shot. Do it now and see what happens. Maybe they're right. But most of the time we find, or all of the time we find out that they're just full of Duke University.
What was really interesting about that is that I was exercising my rights, and I was aware. Okay, so I wasn't proficient in the Bill of Rights the way you were. I couldn't really, refer to the U.S. Constitution the way you were able to do. But I knew that the government works for us. And I knew I was doing no harm. And I knew I was just trying to help moms save their babies. And so when they came for me and they said, well, we need to come and inspect your freezers. I was just like, no, thanks. No, thanks. And they were just like, what? And I said, why are you here? Like, who called you? Well, we were on the website and blah, 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 something. I was like, who told you to come here? Well, it looks like, I was like, but who told you to come here? To which they can never say anything. And they're like, well, if you're doing this, then you should be doing this. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then they were just like, but it looks like you're doing such and such. I said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you want?
Well, even so, I mean, is it illegal to sell food?
It actually isn't. And I know that from you now. And I can throw all that stuff in their face. But at that time, I thought it was fascinating that they couldn't shut me down. And I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I was just telling them, no thanks. And I was only doing it based on the fact that the government works for us. And I just kept telling them that. I'm like, you work for me. And I didn't call you. So why are you here?
Yeah.
But now I have like 15 other things I can say to them. And, I can say a whole lot of stuff to them now. But it was fascinating. Even the CDC, people don't even understand. The CDC is a private company. They have absolutely no jurisdiction over anyone.
No, they have no authority.
Over anybody. And they called me. One time they called because they wanted to know where our raw milk was coming from, Mark.
Center for Disease Control. I would have hung that phone up in a hot minute. Or I would have found out who it was. And
Well,
I'd
I
get
did.
all their
I found out all
information.
the stuff. And then I called Pete Kennedy and I'm like, you want to call this guy and find out what he wants? Because I'm not talking to him,
Yeah, I wouldn't talk to
And
them.
but now I know I don't need to even do that.
No.
I'll tell y'all all this. You don't have to call anybody and tell them CDC has no jurisdiction over anyone. It's a private company. No one knows that. People think
So
that
are the
there's
departments. The departments are privately held as well.
Well, truth be told, the whole U.S. government is three corporations. They're none of them. You don't owe them anything. They're all privately held. And we should be trying to get our country back. That's what we should be doing.
Well, when you say it like that, trying to get our country back, they've never taken it from me. They've never taken it from me. I've never given up my rights.
But are you paying taxes, Mark?
I am.
Okay. Well, taxation is theft. And
I agree. That's a battle for another day, I think.
Well, we got a solution going on. I'll talk to you about that off air, maybe.
Yeah. Land patenting. I've heard about that. It's pretty successful.
You should totally be looking into that for your land, but there's even more I can talk to you about. We'll talk about it. Yeah. We'll talk about it later and see if,
All right. We're on an hour and a half, so I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you go. Can you tell people what your website is? Can you give that out?
Sure. Yeah. So the main website is farm to Fork Meat Riot.org. And because I'm a nutrition coach, like online for people like not local to us, but the folks that are local to Raleigh, North Carolina, who want to participate, to get food here, then they can go to farmtoforkmeat.com. But I think I gave you a link tree, and if you share that link tree, then it has all the ways that people can get in touch with me.
Yeah, Jill will put all that in the show notes. She's just tied up right now, I think.
Yeah.
All right, my dear, thank you very much.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
I see a comment from Deborah O'Neill. She's saying something about having a hard time getting land. Let me tell everybody one thing I found out is that, did you know, if you want to get funding or you want to finance land, that we're not allowed to buy more than 20 acres if we need to finance it, if we don't have cash?
Who's restricting that?
Well, you finance it through USDA.
Oh,
And they're in on it with like no lender can make a loan for more than 20 acres.
yeah.
That's crazy,
Wow.
right?
Yeah, well, there's ways around that.
There
There's a
are, I
lot
mean,
of
you can,
privately held property in the United States,
right,
and the people, the restrictors that we're talking about, the regulators, they're very few, and they're not very dedicated. I'll put it that way. All right,
yeah,
because
they're not.
there is a growing rage in this country, and the people who are in a rage can be very dangerous, extremely dangerous, especially when they outnumber you about 100 to 1 or about 1,000 to 1. So I hear all these things, and you will have less, and you will like it, but I don't think they have the wherewithal to make that happen. It's only when we believe it and we start to act accordingly. But we're not whooped. We're not going to
Right.
be whooped, and you have to operate as though victory is around the corner, because it is. I had a totally victorious day. I had a victorious dinner. I had a victorious interview with you. I'm not defeated in any way, and I'm not going to be by the likes of those Wiener Schnitzels. They're just not that good at it.
They're not. They're
Um,
not.
well, one
Well,
of the
thank
things
you
we're
for
seeing.
everything. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, let me let you go, and then we talk to my people a little bit when you're out of here. Thanks a lot for
Okay.
coming. I'll be talking to you.
Yes.
Okay, good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye. Okay, now I know how to just take her off screen. She's out of here. She can't hear a word we're saying. Now we can talk about her. No, uh, I I'm hearing a very common thread there. I don't know if you guys heard it, but a extremely tragic event, extremely tragic, and a lot of stress. And some people would go through tragedy like that and come out the other side and just collapse. But she didn't. She saw a need and she's fulfilling it. And I like that, by hook or by crook. If I don't know how to do it, I'm going to figure out a way, one way or the other, and never take a knee to the people like that say you can't do this unless we say so. Um, I got a lot of respect for that. We met at the Rogue Food Conference. I never got invited back to that. It's kind of odd, but my message was Constitution, and I think some of the lawyers there didn't like that very much. Um, I wanted a chance to say this to Niti, and I will say this to her another time, but the Bill of Rights to the U.S. Constitution is actually a weapon. And it's not a weapon against us. Like the First Amendment says, I have the right to free speech. I'm a citizen. I have the right to free speech. Well, there's certain things I can't say on this platform because it's privately held. So I have to refrain from doing it. Same as if I was over at your house eating dinner and I wanted to use the F word every now and then. It wouldn't go over too well. And you could say, hey, please don't do that. And I could say, well, I have the right to free speech. And you could say, yeah, but you have not in my house, you don't. All right. But in our country, our government is restrained by the Bill of Rights. They are our rights, not theirs. They have very limited rights, but they've flopped it around, and they've done that by gaining control of the schools and threats and intimidation around every turn. But one of the things we're seeing, and Nithi's an example of it, is a different group of people coming in to the homesteading movement, the food movement, the intentional living movement. There's a bunch of different facets under this canopy. And they're saying, I don't think so. And when they run into pushback, the word is getting around that, oh, you mean we're not subjects to the king? We're actually citizens governed by a constitution. And when that word gets around, it causes problems amongst the parasite class because they don't like that. They're They're into control. And it's been happening for a long time. This isn't something that's you're going to see it peak next week. No, this started, I'd say, nearly 10 years ago, that there's been too much trampling of American citizens' lives and rights, and people were starting to key into it, and then the Wu flu came, and that tipped it over, and people started to question words like law and regulation and mandate. And so there's been a lot of speculation on what has transpired. I feel like preaching here. And you've got really articulate and smart people that are getting into this way of life. Why? Because their cities have been destroyed by that same element that wants to control everything. They want to control it, but they don't want to build into it. That's typical of them. That's typical. The parasite class. You hear me talk about them all the time. But it's kind of ironic in a way that one of their best weapons against the citizenry is threats and intimidation. They're intimidating people to create fear. But who's afraid now? That's what's going on. And I'm not trying to promote it. I'm just saying that's what is going on now. We come and go as we please. We are definitely pro law enforcement, pro military. But the regulation class, they're not coming and going as they please anymore, because they're dealing with an increasingly hostile and this building rage from what they have done. I mean, there's a lot of information that's coming out about what the three-letter agencies have done over a long period of time, and now it's finally breaking through, like cures for cancer. It's really tragic that the FDA clamped down on that as hard as they did, just because of the financial losses that the machine would suffer. It's barbaric what they've done, absolutely barbaric, and yet they'll tell you that they're so concerned about you. But anyway, it was nice having Niti on. I haven't seen her since we met at the Rogue Food Conference, and she was sitting at the table right next to mine, and she spoke first. I think neither of us knew really what to expect there. She was invited back another time, and I never really did get invited back again. Hoping that we see her on Baker's Green Acres one of these days. We have a gathering coming up on the 4th of February that you all need to know about. And it's going to be a day of fun in the sun, although it could be below zero. But we'll have a nice place to be in. And we're just going to have a speaker and maybe another speaker, and get together and start making some plans for where we plan to go as a tribe. I think it's really essential that we group up. There's safety in numbers, right? And there's lots of us. All right. So the tribe has gotten big right now. If you are not in the tribe and you're viewing this on YouTube, it's a Facebook group. It's the Anyone Can Farm Tribe, or the Anyone Can Farm Experience. No, the Anyone Can Farm Tribe. The YouTube channel is the Anyone Can Farm Experience, right? So Tribe Experience. On YouTube, we show a lot of things, and you can experience it on the Tribe. We have the Tribe Plus that you can join up, and it helps us keep this ministry going, because that's really what it is. It's a ministry. It's farming, homesteading, intentional living. It's a way of life, and we have to come together, and we have to share information. We have to support each other. And it's nice being around people that are like-minded. I was asking Joe last night. Oh yeah. I didn't talk to you all last night, but Oh, maybe I did. Maybe that was Tuesday night. But anyway, I said, now, why are we having this gathering? And she said, well, it'll just be fun. All right, that's enough. That's enough reason. It will be fun. So let's do that. Okay, Thursday night, there's our interview out of the way. Oh, yeah, if you want to be on that Facebook group, you've got to, it's a private group, so you have to fill out a little bit of information, and we will thoroughly vet you and check your background, and then maybe we'll let you in. But it's getting pretty big now. I think there's 2,000 people in it or so, which is pretty respectable. And, out of those 2,000 people, we've asked people to come to classes, and there's Andy Zumwalt right there. He came to one of our classes. I still got some of your firewood here, man. There's 3 pieces left. That was a nice touch. All right, I'm going to get going. Let's see. It's supposed to be a warm weekend here, in the mid 30s for January. That's unheard of. Is there anything going on? No, just the February 4th meetup. We're going to start about 9:30 in the morning, but you can come whenever you want and stay as long as you want. It's really not a big deal. If you're going to bring camper and stuff, you just need to let us know so we can get a spot plowed out for you. Jill says dish to pass, but if you can't, and it is a donation only. I mean, we got to cover expenses, but whatever you think you can do. Just so you know, for the Anyone Can Farm tribe ministry, I don't mind calling it that, because it is. It's a way of life. Ministry is a lot of times associated with religion. I don't believe this is a religion. I think it's a real way of life. I live it. In order to keep that ministry going, I mean, it does take dollars here and there. So any donations go towards facilities. I mean, if somebody wants to donate $1 million, I'll build a hotel. And that way, when you come here, there'll be a hotel to stay in, or a bunch of little homes or something like that. Okay. So very good. I appreciate all of you coming. Thanks for Niti for joining us tonight. And we'll be talking at you soon. Okay. Remember, anyone can farm.